Like in my Mummy review, I'd like to take a look at a film franchise that's widely popular, but to my knowledge has never been the subject of an in-depth video essay. Legally Blonde. Because God knows you people need to shut the fuck up about Star Wars. Only one channel on YouTube makes good Star Wars videos. The rest of you suck! You suck! Seriously, y'all, if I ever make a Star Wars video, please have me euthanized immediately. Just take me out back and fucking shoot me. Anyway, earlier this month, Reese Witherspoon confirmed rumors that Legally Blonde 3 was in the works. Great idea, MGM. Just don't fuck it up! I predict that Legally Blonde will go down in history as one of the great American comedies of the early 21st century, very much in the way Some Like It Hot is remembered today. It's not perfect, it does have stupid moments.
Oh my god, the bend and snap works every time!
But it is nearly perfect, which is a hell of a lot better than the dumpster fire that is the modern romantic comedy genre. Most rom-coms go for the lowest common denominator, just like big dumb action movies. You go to the theater, turn your brain off, and try to forget about your shitty life. But Legally Blonde is not your typical rom-com. The script is airtight, and its execution is surgical and precise. Every performance in the film is rock solid, and Reese Witherspoon is nothing short of amazing.
Me!
Legally Blonde is not simply an above-average, by-the-numbers comedy. It is a prime example of impeccably utilized story structure. This shit is highly subjective, and there's no one way to do it, but I was taught that any good story needs to answer two major dramatic questions. The first pertains to plot, the second to story. Plot and story are not the same thing. Plot is the literal sequence of events of a movie, book, or play. Story is how those events happen and why we care about them. So the two major dramatic questions of Legally Blonde, as I see them, are plot, will Elle win back Warner's love? And story, will Elle grow into her potential? Legally Blonde handles the difference between the two perfectly. Elle solves the Wyndham murder, answering the major dramatic question of the story. Immediately afterward, she rejects Warner, and answers the major dramatic question of the plot. Elle's coming of age renders Warner's love irrelevant, and through the course of her heroine's journey, she's earned a far greater reward than the original object of her quest. This is an ancient story device, as old as time. In the first known written story, the Epic of Gilgamesh, the main character fails in terms of the plot. He does not retain the elixir of life, but succeeds in terms of story. He comes home with a newfound acceptance of his own mortality. Typically, the major dramatic question of the story is answered just before the major dramatic question of the plot, so the protagonist can use the knowledge, weapon, or magical boon that he or she has gained to overcome their principal enemy or obstacle. For example, Luke learns to let go and trust his feelings and use the Force, and then he destroys the Death Star. Oh, fuck me. This is turning into a Star Wars video, isn't it? Oh god, I can't escape it. Please kill me. I've been dangerously oversaturated with Star Wars. Oh god. Speaking of three-act structure, this is basically how I break it down. First act is the incident, second act is the revelation, and third act is the consequence. I further subdivide those into initiating incident, crossing the threshold, point of no return, crisis, challenge, and climactic moment. Notice how I left out exposition and resolution. You don't need that shit. You also don't need meeting with the mentor, or apotheosis with the father, or whatever the fuck else Joseph Campbell pulled out of the Iliad when he was stoned. All you need, for a three-act structure at least, are these 6 elements. It's like cooking meth. Blue food coloring might get you more street value, because every junkie's seen Breaking Bad, but you don't need it to get glassed.
Actually, it's just basic chemistry, but thank you, Jesse. I'm glad it's acceptable.
So, initiating incident. Warner breaks up with Elle. This makes Elle immediately sympathetic and endears her to the audience. Crossing the threshold. Elle moves to Boston. She has left home and embarked into unknown territory. Sometimes this unknown territory can be literal, like Gilgamesh and Enkidu traveling to the Cedar Forest, or it can be metaphorical, like Hamlet deciding to feign madness. In the Campbellian tradition, the heroine then faces tests, makes enemies, and meets allies. Point of no return. Elle gets into Callahan's internship. She is now 100% committed to her growth as a lawyer and a woman. Crisis. Callahan, that scumbag, makes a move on Elle. This seemingly confirms her worst fears and suspicions.
Callahan never saw me as a lawyer. He just saw me as a piece of ass.
She resolves to abandon the quest. We care because we're rooting for Elle, and it's heart-wrenching to see her give up after coming so far. This can also manifest in a symbolic death. The heroine then gets rescued. In Elle's case, she's rescued by an unlikely ally. This is hinted at brilliantly in the costume design. During Callahan's internship, Elle is wearing drab black suits. But after her resurrection, she reappears wearing a hot pink dress, a symbol of her individuality and self-acceptance. Challenge. Elle has to cross-examine Chutney. She's leaning heavily on her notes. It's not going well. But because Chutney makes a grave error, she's able to put aside her notes and rely on her own intuition. Climactic moment. Elle backs Chutney up into a corner.
I thought it was you walking through the door!
And not only passes, but friggin' slays her ultimate test. Her coming of age is now complete. Legally Blonde isn't a great movie because it follows 3-act structure. It's great because each plot point is strong as steel. The acting, directing, writing, editing, music, you name it, they all correspond perfectly to give the story the emotional weight it needs to make us care. If Legally Blonde is Chris Kyle dropping an insurgent at 2,000 meters, Legally Blonde 2 is ED-209 spraying a board meeting with machine gun fire. Legally Blonde 2 is an unworthy sequel, not because so many of the jokes fall flat, though they do.
Your dogs are gay.
And not because barely any characters from the first film return in this one, though that doesn't help. It's because the story structure is weak as fuck.
Full sizzle, my ezzle.
So after this stupid scrapbook scene that clearly just shows production stills from the first movie, yeah, who has taken high-quality photographs of Emmett and Elle? Was it a private detective investigating Emmett for insurance fraud? Was it the local rapist picking out his next victims? Who was it? Anyway, story structure. The initiating incident of Legally Blonde 2 is dumb and gives us no reason to care about Elle's new quest. So Elle wants Bruiser's mom to come to her wedding, so she tracks her down and finds her imprisoned in an animal testing facility. So after getting fired, she decides to go to Washington, D.C. to pass legislation to get these animals released from their prisons. We are given no reason to care about Bruiser's mom. If the object of the quest is frivolous, it renders the whole quest meaningless. Elle crosses the threshold by going to Washington, D.C., in a sequence that's badly ripped off from the first movie. Then there's this whip pan over nothing. There are a bunch of weird transitions and camera movements in the second movie that just don't jive at all with the tone of the first. The point of no return comes when Sally Field rescinds her support of Bruiser's bill. Elle has to throw herself deeper into the political system to keep fighting without her. The scenes with Sally Field are probably the best in the movie. It's kinda cool that Elle has to face a formidable female adversary. And this joke is gold.
Don't worry, Bob. I'll get her. And her little dog, too.
The crisis is incredibly weak and perhaps even non-existent. The threat Sally Field poses as a bad guy is entirely neutralized when it's revealed that she left her microphone in, and her evil plan was being recorded the entire time. It's so stupid. The challenge is as flaccid as a bald man in a BMW. Elle pushes aside her written speech to speak from the heart. This mirrors the first movie beat for beat, but it doesn't work because Elle has already learned to believe in herself. She doesn't need to learn that lesson again. The climactic moment has absolutely no sense of urgency or high stakes. Elle has essentially already won. With Grace as an ally, she could just force Sally Field to vote for the bill. And this asinine personal story about her hair has no relevance to the story or any of the themes of the movie. Not that this movie has a theme, except that MGM loves money! Long story short, Legally Blonde 2 demonstrates a profound ignorance about what made the first movie good. As a result, it's convoluted, boring, and creatively bankrupt. The plot of the third movie is all a matter of speculation at this point. I've heard some good suggestions and some bad ones.
I think it'd be kind of a cool thing to have her be a Supreme Court justice or something who runs for office.
Go big or go
President?
home,
I mean...
No. We did the politics thing already and it did not work out well. This is Legally Blonde, not Politically Blonde. Deadline reported that Legally Blonde 3 will be much in the spirit of the first film, in which Woods' idealism and pink-dominant wardrobe prevailed over the cynicism and snootiness all around her. The intention here is to make this more about female empowerment, a message that hits at a fortuitous time in the culture. The feeling is to draw back in the audience that grew up with the original film and find a new global audience. That's definitely going in the right direction. But let's not forget that Elle's pink wardrobe prevailed over snootiness in the second film too. Again, that is not what made the first one great. It was just the basis for much of the humor. The female empowerment angle is a very good move. Obviously, Legally Blonde 3 will be made under the shadow of the Me Too movement, and there are a couple ways that they can handle this. It would be a misstep to explicitly reference current events. It would date the movie immediately. You couldn't watch it in 10 years. It would be like, oh, this movie is so 2020. What they should do is be classy. They should have sexual harassment and or sexism be an obstacle Elle has to overcome in service of the greater story. For example, Warner was a selfish asshole. He underestimated Elle in part because he saw women as an accessory. We didn't need an overt commentary on sexism or current events to understand that. Callahan was a pervy old cunt, and the reason that his betrayal of Elle was so affecting was because we'd spent the last hour building him up as a mentor and a father figure. That scene, as gross as it is, serves a concrete purpose in propelling our protagonist's growth. That said, don't be easy on sexists. Give those dirtbags a good drubbing. Whatever you do, undersexed douchebags will complain that Legally Blonde 3 is feminist propaganda.
From what we've seen, it looks like they depict men as evil and cold and bumblers. That's what it looks like.
So what should Legally Blonde 3 be about? I got a few suggestions. I think it should take place in Boston. Elle and Vivian co-own the Woods and Kensington law firm. Elle and Emmett should either be going through a really rough patch in their marriage, or maybe Emmett just leaves her straight up. Fact is, Reese Witherspoon and Luke Wilson have really bad chemistry. They shouldn't be all lovey-dovey like they were in the second movie. One day, Woods and Kensington gets a knock on their office door. It's fucking Warner Huntington III! He's turned his life around and now he's a Massachusetts senator. He just got embroiled in some sort of horrible sex scandal and needs Elle and Vivian, best legal minds in the country, to defend him. Emmett's firm ends up prosecuting Warner, and the problems in their marriage manifest in the legal battle. Public opinion turns on Elle and Vivian. I mean, Warner's a huge scumbag and very probably guilty, but they stick by him, because the right to a fair trial is sacred, and the law is reason free from passion. Kind of like when John Adams defended those British soldiers after the Boston Massacre. So we continue with the idealism versus cynicism thing without doing the same been there, done that shit. MGM has a great opportunity here to atone for Legally Blonde 2, to make another awesome chick flick for the ages, and to inspire a new generation not to take shit from jerk-off dudes and frigid bitches. Don't hire yes men to make this movie. Hire dedicated, talented people with a vision. This isn't fucking Star Wars. The fact that it's a Legally Blonde sequel will not be enough to get butts in seats. You have to approach this film with the same heart, grace, and storytelling precision that made us all fall in love with Elle Woods in the first place.
Tell me it's your style.